question is, can countries and regions become more sustainable? This is a framework which is sort of set up by the United Nations. It's a universal agenda where there's a commitment to say that everybody, no country and no place would have poverty, where everybody would have food, universal healthcare. But there are 2 or 3 really important differences. The environment agenda, which started in '92 with Rio and a whole range of other processes, is integral to this process just now. But inside this idea that everybody everywhere would actually connect this are 3 very interesting, I would say, revolutionary thoughts here. The first thought is that no one should be left behind. And this is absolutely critical to the idea of adaptation, because adaptation, at least in our environments, is critically related to vulnerability. The second thing is that no place would be left behind. And in a country which has so much of diversity, the idea of dealing with spatial justice is very important. And finally, you cannot do no one or no place behind unless we make sure that no ecosystem is left behind. It's a really interesting idea, a universal set of goals in which no one, no place, and no ecosystem is left behind. But the story that we don't tell, and this is not the IPCC telling it, it's me telling you that, is that the NDCs, the stuff that we agreed in Paris, is actually the fast elevator to somewhere near 3 degrees. And this is, I think, it's a difficulty. We've agreed that we're going to reach 3. So we actually have to dramatically change things. And I guess the 1.5 report is really the way in which we can actually, try and see whether we can make it possible. So the key thing that I think you have to understand is what we outlined in the 1.5 report is the idea of overshoot. Now, what does that overshoot mean? We don't know exactly how long and how far and how deep it will be, but what are the potential impacts? The obvious one is temperature rise. The big question for us is, when you look at the difference between 1.5 and 2, the numbers are actually quite stunning. In the agricultural system, we're talking about a shift of between, let's say, between 40 million and 400 million people being at risk. So these are huge nonlinear changes. This is exactly the reason why we say every day and every 0.1 of a degree makes a difference, because it impacts many, 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 many people across the world. So basically, this overshoot could push a large number of natural humans and human systems beyond their limits to adaptation. So that's one of the big debates that we're having just now. How do you define the questions of limits to adaptation? What are the residual risks, and how can we deal with this? This is what has been going on for the last 3 days in this room here. If we overshoot, one of the only ways to deal with this is to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Of course, you can help with afforestation, reforestation for a whole range of things. But in other parts of the world, this is something that's going to create a huge amount of conflict. So I guess the question is, we can make a transition to 1.5 world, but this requires a completely different way of dealing with it. And the simple way that I try and explain this is, it requires a minimum partnership of 200 countries, about 193 of them, and at least 5,000 places. And we have to do that in, you guess how many days? In less than 4,000 days. That's all left. That's all that's left between now and 2030. Which means that we have to get province by province, district by district, the mobilization to make this happen. And that is why your being here is absolutely crucial and critical. So how do you deal with this is a very, very challenging question. And we are trying to wrestle with these questions in the literature, in the science, because we literally have a generation to make this happen. If we don't, the consequences are clear and obvious. The science is very clear. We have no ambiguity as far as that is concerned. So it's up to us as individuals, as people in particular institutions, and as societies to make this change in our everyday lives and in the structures and processes that we're part of.